Hello, everyone. I'm Adam Fishman, the Executive Director of American Friends of Likud, and once again, I welcome you to our series, our American Friends of Likud exclusive Insiders Briefing webinar series. And today we are very excited to have a very close friend of ours, very close to American Friends of Likud, very close to the communities, both in the States and New York, and now Senior Rabbi in Dubai. Of course, I will turn over the official introduction to our moderator, Sarah Beiser, who is, as we said on the last one, who made Aliyah just recently within the last month, but is now, I think, back on the East Coast. I will ask you once again, if you have any questions during the course of the webinar, to please use the Q&A feature on your screen, and we will get to as many of them as we can. In the meantime, I will sign off and I will hand it over to Sarah to make the introduction, and then turn it over to Rabbi Abadie. Sarah?
So Rabbi, we're pleased to have one of our own AFL board members here with us today. And first, before we start, we'll introduce you, and it's really not hard to say wonderful, incredible things about you. So I'd like to introduce, and there's a lot of titles here, Rabbi Dr. Elie Abadie, now Senior Rabbi. I don't know if you're the first Senior Rabbi, maybe so, of the Jewish Council of the Emirates. So Rabbi was appointed to serve as Dubai's community senior rabbi, and you don't look old enough to be a senior rabbi, but we'll accept that that's true. For the Jewish Council of the Emirates, called the JCE. The JCE is the country's oldest congregation and the only one recognized by local authorities. Rabbi was appointed and moved with his entire family to Dubai last year as the Emirati community began to expand following the historic Abraham Accords. Having grown up in Syria and in Lebanon, Rabbi is most skilled in understanding the customs, nuances, and sentiments of both Jewish expatriate as well as the local populations. Rabbi Abadie's distinction as a medical doctor, rabbi, scholar in New York, and also he's well known as serving as the spiritual leader of the Edmund Soffer Synagogue for many years. He founded the school of the Sephardic Academy of Manhattan and headed the Jacob Soffer Institute of Sephardic Studies at Yeshiva. He is an officer of the Written Council of America and co-president of Justice for Jews from Arab Countries, a group advocating for Jewish refugees from the Middle East. Rabbi, we are delighted to have you speaking to us today from the UAE.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you, Adam. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I have been many times as a attendee to these webinars, or even as a moderator to these webinars, but now I am a guest, so it feels slightly different. But here I am, yes, in Dubai. Again, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you and to all those that are listening in this webinar. So I guess you want to know what brings me to Dubai, what happened, and so on and so forth. So the story of my relationship with the UAE, United Arab Emirates, it really goes back to almost 11 years ago. As a rabbi of the Edmund Soffer Synagogue in New York City, as you know, I used to welcome a lot of dignitaries from all over the world, and some of those dignitaries were from the UAE. Although their visit was more of a private visit than a public visit, but of course I gave them the tour of the synagogue. We spoke in Arabic. As you know, I was born in Lebanon, I speak Arabic. In fact, I showed them some sidurim in Arabic and some halakha books, Jewish law books, written in Arabic, actually. And so they were fascinated with that. So I kind of kept in touch with those authorities without anything except just friendship. What happened was that 2 years ago, my dear friend Eli Epstein, who was the one who really introduced the UAE dignitaries to me in New York and introduced me to the UAE and then the Jewish community in the UAE. 2 years ago, he donated, in a sense, he brought a Sefer Torah in honor of, in memory actually, of Sheikh Zayed, who is the father of this nation, the United Arab Emirates, in his memory. And so he wanted a Sephardic Sefer Torah because he believed that the UAE, it's a Sephardic land, so to speak, right? It's a Mizrahi land. And so that was, and it's beautifully decorated with golden color case, as you know, the famous Middle Eastern Torah cases. And I was the sofer, actually, not of the entire Torah, but I was the sofer who concluded that. So I came the first time here on Purim, exactly 2 years ago. We celebrated that within the community. We celebrated Purim within the community, and that's how I got to know the community and kept in touch with them. Last year, we brought the Torah officially and we presented it to the Crown Prince, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed in Abu Dhabi, and it was received very, very well, enthusiastically, with great respect and dignity. And that's how I kept in touch with the rulers here of the UAE and also the Jewish community, of course. And I have been kind of their consultant for many things and so on and so forth. And once the accords were signed, then I was asked by Rabbi Sarna and the community here if I would be willing to come and be the rabbi, as they thought I would be, the most fitting candidate, so to speak, as I speak Arabic. I know the culture, the language, the nuances of the Middle East. My relationship with Israel and the Israeli government and Jewish communities throughout the world. So they felt that it would be a great idea to come here to lead the community and to build up the entire community. I thought about it for a few days. I consulted a few of my very close friends and family, of course. And I decided that indeed is a historic moment. We are at the crossroad of history, and believing that this region, and don't forget that at that time there was only the UAE who had signed already normalization agreements, but we understood that those agreements are going to be exemplary for other nations in the region to also sign peace and normalization agreements. And so I understood that this opportunity is not just to be a rabbi of a community, to lead the Jewish community, but to be kind of the Jewish presence in the Gulf, in the entire Gulf, and to serve the future growing Jewish community and whatever is needed in this area to, in a sense, create this harmony, coexistence in this entire region. And so I accepted the position. And now 2.5 months ago, I came here and I began the arduous work of first building up a true community with all the necessary institutions that have to be part of the foundation of the community. At the same time, establishing connection and rapport with the ruling government, the ruling family, and the government of the UAE, including the local government of Dubai. Then establishing relationship and channels of communications with other communities of faith, as there are many of them here. Then, of course, with the local Emiratis and every person, different communities that exist here in the UAE. And that's what I have been spending my last 2.5 months meeting with government officials, with the communities of faith, with local Emiratis, with what we call them here expats that are non-Emiratis, but people from all over the world that come to work here. Plus, of course, getting to know each and every member of the community and trying to establish all the, as I said, the institutions that really mark the foundation of a Jewish community. That's where I have been spending my time and my efforts.
Sarah, you want to
Yes.
first
So,
question? Go ahead.
Right. I have a very easy question for the first question.
Yes.
Tell us about Tu B'Shvat. Tell us about Tu B'Shvat in the UAE. Tell us what you're doing, and tell us how you think you'll celebrate Pesach.
Well, Tu B'Shvat, as many of the previous holidays, due to the corona, were celebrated via Zoom. I just had actually from 7 to 8 p.m. Dubai time, That's 3 hours ago. We had an entire celebration of Tu B'Shvat with the community here in the UAE, but also with the communities in Israel and in the United States, actually around the world. It was a worldwide Tu B'Shvat celebration that we as a community participated. Don't forget that pretty much the fruit of choice of the UAE, like what typifies UAE fruit, are the dates, the actual dates. And so here, wherever you go, you're going to find dates of many species of dates. In fact, whenever you go to visit somebody, the tradition is you bring them a basket of dates or a box of dates. And this is really the fruit of the country. I did find out something very, very interesting. The type of dates, those big ones, juicy ones, very fleshy ones, that everybody calls them medjool dates. And I bet you nobody knows what that means. But I do know what that means because that's an Arabic word that was created apparently in this area centuries ago. Majhul in Arabic, majhul means confused. You know, you talk sometimes about teenagers that are majhulin, which are confused. So why is this date called majhul? Because apparently when they found it for the first time or so, when they're trying to sell it, and they ask, what kind of a date is this? So he says, majhul, you know, I'm confused about what type of a date. Well, it became the medjool date. And so that was a way to celebrate Tu B'Shvat.
I have a box of medjool dates in my fridge. I was zocheh. I was privileged to have one, an Israeli date, one of the Shivat Aminim, one of the seven species here in Israel just today. You mentioned other communities of faith, and one of the first questions that we had coming across the board here from Daniel Kahana, do you feel that citizens of the UAE, well, speaking of other communities of faith, Judaism is obviously a very small community, the Jewish community. Islam is the most predominant. But do you feel that citizens of the UAE generally practice a more tolerant form of Islam as compared to other countries in the Middle East? And how does it compare to your experiences in Syria and Lebanon?
Obviously, the answer is yes, because I have been very, very welcomed with government officials, with local Emiratis, local Muslim population. They're very enthusiastic, very excited, very curious to know about Judaism, about Jews, about Israelis. Many of them, they want to learn Hebrew, and some of them have been self-taught Hebrew. Amazing. They sing Hebrew songs, they try to speak to me in Hebrew, and so on and so forth. So yes, the practice of Islam here is a very moderate Islam, what is believed to be the true Islam. And they repudiate radicalism, fanaticism, and strict interpretation of the Quran that, according to them, is not what true Islam is all about. So yes, they're very welcoming, very tolerant. Don't forget, the UAE declared the year 2019 as the year of tolerance. That was the year in which a document of tolerance was signed by the great Imam, the Pope, on tolerance of religious belief and religious faith in the UAE. A book of tolerance was published by the government. In it, many communities of faith were featured, including the Jewish community, the JCE, and with all the religious artifacts. By us, it was a Sefer Torah and Megillah, Talit, Tefillin. By other religious communities of faith, they had their religious artifacts and religious symbols. And so, yes, this country is a country of tolerance, country of coexistence, a country of harmony with many communities of faith. And of course, the Jewish community of faith probably is the smallest one, but as always, Jews make a lot of noise. So now we are though we are probably the smallest, as I said, but all the eyes are on us, so to speak, with positive curiosity. But of course, you have Christians, you have Catholics, you have evangelists, you have Methodists, you have Protestants, you have Hindus, you have Zoroastrians, you have Buddhism, you have community of faith from any other faith that exists in the world. They live here and they have their house of worship, and they worship as freely as possible.
So Rabbi, the next question is from Nira Abramowitz, who I think you know. And
Sure.
Nira says that it's great to see you representing all of us in the Emirates, and would like to know what are some of the major business and cultural exchanges that are taking place between the Emirates and Israel.
Thank you, Nira. Thank you for your question. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Well, let me just tell you one example today, and I'll start from that. Is today I placed the mezuzah on the doors of the new office of the Israel-Dubai Diamond Exchange Chamber. And that's one of the many chambers that have now been established. There is the tech industry, Israel-Dubai, Israel-UAE Chamber of Commerce. There is the security industry. Now there is the wine industry, believe it or not, also opening up. The agricultural industry. There is almost no sector of business and industry that either already is starting to be represented or for sure will be represented within the next 6 months. So on every aspect of human endeavor, there is going to be exchanges, and memorandums of understanding have been signed and they are being signed in all those areas of, as I said, of human endeavor. So the potential for business is great. Atzum is really great because from both sides are very curious to have that exchange. There is common investments, there is common creativity, and the UAE is a quite a modern country. They have high security, high technology, and so when you combine that also with the advances in Israel, you have a great potential there.
So the next question is from Carol Basri, and she'd like to know, how is Dubai doing managing the pandemic? If you know, what are the statistics? Are they vaccinating people now? Have you been vaccinated? What's going on?
Well, when I came, the rate of infection was quite low. The amount of people infected when I came 2.5 months was 177,000 and fraction of people infected, with the amount of death of 570. So percentage-wise is very, very low compared to many countries. I mean, this country was, if not the second or so, best country in that aspect. I don't know if to use the word unfortunately, but the doors were open to Israeli tourism, significant Israeli tourism. Over 70,000, if not more, Israeli tourists came here, and they went back to Israel, and they got, developed Corona. And so now they're kind of the blame game between Israel and the UAE. I mean, today I read a statement made by one of the Corona health leaders in Israel that I think it was, I have to say it was a very irresponsible statement by her. She said that there were more people death in peace with the UAE than in 70 years of wars because of the Corona. That's first of all, that's incorrect. It's inappropriate. It's a lie. It's irresponsible to have said that, because I am almost sure that the Israelis are the ones who brought the Corona to Dubai. And then they went back with it. They infected fellow Israelis as they were here, but they brought it from Israel. And when they went back, then they went back with Corona, with positive Corona. I'm telling you, when I came here 2.5 months ago, the rate was very low. The numbers were very low, infected and death. And lo and behold, after 70, 80,000 Israelis, the rate shot up of infection, of people in ICUs, and unfortunately, people dying. But still, the UAE is the second nation in the world after Israel in vaccination. It has vaccinated now almost 15% of its population. It had started the vaccination actually over a month ago, more than that, with the Chinese, with Sinopharm vaccine. Now they have moved to Pfizer. The Chinese vaccine is still available. Pfizer is available, and soon I understand Moderna will also be available. So, but we are much more relaxed, I have to say. The business is open, people are on the street, but people are very obedient of the rules of the health guidelines, masks everywhere and anywhere, social distancing, and I'm sure we'll overcome this very soon.
Were you vaccinated as well?
I was not vaccinated. I am telling the truth as a doctor. I would like to wait until over 10 million people worldwide have been vaccinated to see for side effects. For many of those vaccines, like any update, electronic update to iPhones or Samsung, whatever those machines, you wait. You don't get the first update. You wait until the glitches on those updates are corrected, then you get it. Likewise with the vaccines, there are glitches in those vaccines that they will be corrected, especially now with the new strains from South Africa, from England, from everywhere else that it's coming up. Those same vaccines will be readjusted to cover those. So why get the vaccine before all those glitches are fixed? So I could wait. I could wait for the vaccine another month or two, and then probably I will get it.
By the way, I happen to have seen, actually, there was a video that was of you putting up that mezuzah on the office of the Israel Diamond Exchange. I hope everyone had a chance to see that. I saw it on Arutz Sheva, but it really is a remarkable, remarkable thing to witness, to see a mezuzah, just the fact that there is an Israel UAE Diamond Exchange there in Dubai, and you putting up the mezuzah. I want to ask a question from our president, Jerry Platz, who is in New York, and wishes you very well, of course. And recognizing that the Abraham Accords, that the Iranian threat, getting into the political aspect of some of this, the Iranian threat was a major catalyst in bringing all these parties together. Do you feel that the incoming administration's clear intentions to revisit the JCPOA or some modified version of it, that it may affect the Accords? And that's the first part of that question. Second being a concern that perhaps it sends a global message that an American promise is only as good as the administration which is in place. But that's remains to be seen. The question, though, the main question, as I said, is the Biden administration's intentions to revisit the JCPOA and how that will affect what you're seeing from the Abraham Accords.
Well, thank you, Jerry. Nice to have you here with us. And I'm hoping you'll come and visit us one day with the AFL American Friends of Likud mission. You'll make a detour before you get to Israel or after you get to Israel, or maybe you'll come here and then we'll go together to Israel. So looking forward for that. So to answer your two questions, the Abraham Accords were not an overnight normalization accords. These accords have been taking place for several years. Contact between the UAE and Israel have been for at least 15 years. Many of those contacts were under the table, quietly, but it was kind of the most, what do you call that? The most known secret, so to speak. Security exchange, cooperation, technology cooperation, strategic and military cooperation has been taking place for several years. So the accord normalization was basically bringing on the table what was happening under the table, but of course with expanded agreements and so on and so forth, diplomatic relations, economic relations, so on and so forth. And so yes, Iran, the nuclear Iran threat was a catalyst, but it was not the only catalyst, and it was not the only reason. I know when the accords were announced, I'm sorry to say, but unfortunately, they're very much ignorant people in the world, and many of them think of themselves to be, great political commentators and analysis. And they all said, "Oh, see, President Trump did this because he wants to win re-election." Accords like this are not planned, executed overnight because President Trump woke up one day and said, because I want to win re-election, let me force the UAE and Israel make a peace accord. It's ridiculous. Anybody who would say that, it shows their political ignorance completely. I mean, accords like this, you have to change an entire country's policies. You have to change motivation. You have to change desire. You have to change willingness. To make a statement like this, to me, it just shows plain ignorance. And yes, many people who think of themselves very smart made those statements. So again, yes, the Iranian threat may have been a catalyst, but it's not all. Having been living here now for 2.5 months, I could tell you for sure that this normalization is not government to government, is not top to top. It's people, nation to nation, people to people. The Emiratis are excited about this peace treaty. They're thrilled, they're curious about it. They want to know more, they want to cooperate more. Many of them and government officials have told me they have been tired, sick and tired that the so-called Palestinian narrative has hijacked the entire politics of the Middle East. And they feel that they have been hijacked, that their entire history since their establishment until now has been hijacked by that politics, by the same old narrative of Palestinian issues. He says, finally we woke up and we realized that that narrative is false, is not true. And why should we sacrifice the interest of our country, the interest of the region, just because some people are refusing to make peace, some people are rejecting so many peace offers? We don't want to do that anymore. We want to look at what's the best interest to our country, and that's what we're going to do. And they're thrilled with the peace accord. They're very, very happy. A poll was made, and a government official told me that they took a poll after they signed the accords and for their population, hoping that if they would get 50% approval, they'll be fine. They said 50%, as long as we have 50%, 51%, that's the majority of our population, we're happy about it. Well, guess what number of approval they got? 80%. They said 80%, and many of our regular policies of other things, we don't get 80% approval. We got 80% on this peace accord, we are doing very well. So that's the answer to your first question. To the second question, unfortunately, I find the Biden administration to be doing things just to do the opposite of what President Trump did or the Trump administration did. And that's a mistake, because they need to assess every issue, I think, case by case. And yes, give it a good thought. You like it, you don't like it, what's the logical policy, and go ahead and do it. But don't just do things just because I want to do exactly the opposite of what the Trump administration did. Now, will Biden's administration affect these accords? I think not in the least at all. If anything, probably it will strengthen them, because the Gulf region and Israel are going to realize that they don't have the support of the United States, that they're on their own, so to speak. And when they feel they're on their own, they have to say, we're going to have to stick together and make sure we succeed. And so that's why it might be actually the opposite effect that the Biden administration will have, exactly the same as when Obama's administration did. It had the opposite effect, in which it was really, if we want to thank Obama for one thing and only one thing, because I don't think there's anything else that we can thank him about, and I'm sorry for getting involved in politics, but that's my personal opinion. not representing American Friends of Likud. All right. My personal opinion is there's one thing that we can really thank Obama and nothing else, and that is that he got the Arabs and Israelis together, because by him siding with Iran, making the nuclear accord, the Arabs realized that they only have one friend in this region, and that is Israel. And that's why those accords came about. Now, will that affect the accord? As I said, I don't think it will, but what it might affect is future accords, because there's supposed to be another 3 to 4 Arab countries that are contemplating or in the process. Of course, Oman is one of them. Believe it or not, Kuwait, maybe Pakistan, maybe even Syria, countries that eventually would have been on that path of normalization. Would have taken some time had the Trump administration been in power. But now that the Biden administration been in power, so that process might slow down, because that process, those countries are a little bit more difficult to cajole, to encourage, to help steer them towards that direction. And so that might be affected. But other than that, whatever has been signed, I don't think will be affected. If anything, it will improve.
So, Rabbi, I'm going to ask you a question in your role as now a political scientist and possibly as a diplomat.
Yes.
What do you think will be the future? Given we have a Biden administration, what will be the future for the Palestinians and for the Palestinian state? I fear that we will wake up one morning and find out, like we did with the Iran deal, that the UN has just voted on a new Iran deal and a Palestinian state.
Unfortunately, that might be the case. That might be the case because, as you know, the Biden administration, was it today that it already announced that they're resuming financial support of the PA. They're again holding on with the two-state solution, and they're going to go with that same narrative. So yeah, that might be the case. And it's unfortunate because I believe this entire region, we're going through a new direction, a positive direction, a peaceful direction, a direction of coexistence, cooperation amongst the nations in this region. And unfortunately, the Biden administration is the same old American policy. And that goes not just amongst Democrats. Republicans had that also in the past too, where the same old narrative, the same narrative again and again and again, which will take them nowhere. It will take them nowhere. So there'll be more votes at the United Nations, and there will be more votes here and more votes there for two-state solution, for against Israel or whatever. I believe we're just going to go through the same motions as before, and hoping eventually we will overcome that.
Working off of what you said before, that the normalization agreement is something that's taken a lot of time, and that is people to people, not necessarily government to government. There's business and there's community connections there. Steve Goldberg in California, our board member in California, who you know well, asks whether that relationship would be affected in some way if Israel were to exercise sovereignty over some of the communities in Yudan and Shomron, in Judea and Samaria.
Yes, of course, I cannot be speaking in the name of the UAE government. I'm not a politician. I'm certainly not privy to their decisions and what they would want to do. The only thing I could tell you, that an official of the government stated 2 months ago, or more than 2 months ago, to me and to a group of people, that the only thing that UAE was able to do is to delay sovereignty in those areas, not to cancel them. The only thing they achieved is delaying them, not cancel them. What would the UAE do if Israel would extend that sovereignty? I would not know. I would not want to speculate either what would happen. But I do believe that the accords are strong enough that they will weather that. Of course, there will be bumps on the road because of that. There might be some discontent. There might be some disagreement about that. but I do not think the accords will be abrogated or anything like that. I don't think so. I think the UAE will respect Israel as a sovereign state to decide what they want to do. Don't forget, there are products here from Judea and Samaria without any differentiation from where the product comes. It says Israel. And those are in many supermarkets in the UAE. And that's the official position, as I understand, of the UAE government, that there's no differentiation between where the product is coming from.
Interesting. So I have two questions that are totally unrelated, but leading off of what you just said, what is the UAE's perspective about BDS? And maybe actually you've just answered that, but I'll give you an opportunity to answer that again. And then the second question, totally not related, one of our members asks about the pin that you're wearing and what symbolism it carries, because we can't see it all that well, but we'd like to know what the pin is about.
Sure. So to answer your first question, the official position of the UAE government, from what I know, is they are against BDS. They don't agree with it because they don't believe that that's the proper way of expressing disagreement about something. And so therefore, that's why we see products from Judea and Samaria here without any differentiation and tagging. So they all are coming from Israel with the flag of Israel on them. So that's what I understand is the official position. If I may add my own view, and in fact, it just came out, it's coming out actually today in the Daily Telegraph, I think, or the Guardian, the Guardian in the United Kingdom. I was interviewed. The BDS, unfortunately, is detrimental to the Palestinian Arab population of Judea and Samaria and of the territories that they call the PA territories, because many of those products that are produced in that area, as you know, I'm sure, are produced by Palestinian Arabs who work there. There are a lot of those employees of those companies, even vineyards, they employ Palestinian Arabs. And so if you boycott those products, you're only negatively affecting are the Palestinian Arabs, those that you're you're supposed to be supporting with your BDS. And so it's like they're shooting themselves in the foot. So look, Israel can move those factories into Tel Aviv and the Negev and the Galil, and then that's it. Who would be mostly affected negatively? The Palestinian Arabs. And so that's why the policy of BDS is erroneous from anywhere that we see, politically, diplomatically, and even to really achieve what they want to is negative. Now, as to the second question, this is basically the map of the United Arab Emirates. And this is the flag of the United Arab Emirates. There are 7 Emirates, and as you see, there are seven. I hope you can see it clearly. There are seven columns that represent the 7 Emirates. Wearing it is basically being proud of being a resident of the United Arab Emirates. And I display it every day with pride and with dignity. I believe the United Arab Emirates is a exemplary nation in this region, and is the Khalutz, if you call it, right? Is that nation that led the way to normalization with Israel. After the UAE, you had Bahrain, you had Sudan, Morocco, soon hopefully Oman, and the rest of the country. So I display it with pride. That's what it is.
So Rabbi, we have a question from Julio, who I think you know very, very well, Julio Besser from New York.
My fellow gastroenterologist.
Was that right?
Yes.
Are you planning to visit?
I didn't say my gastroenterologist. I said my fellow gastroenterologist. We share the same specialty.
You do. Okay. I have not gone to one of those doctors yet. Thank goodness. Are you planning to visit or dialogue with Saudi Arabia?
Yes, I am. I have already traveled to Bahrain I will be traveling, God willing, to Oman next month, and I will be traveling to Saudi, hopefully also next month. Yes, I will be dialoguing with them. I have a very dear friend actually in Saudi Arabia, who is Sheikh, His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed Al Isa, who is the head of the Muslim World League. He was the Minister of Justice in the past. He is really the one who visited Auschwitz exactly a year ago on the Holocaust Remembrance Day. And he is really a courageous man who has changed the way Muslims and Islam sees the Holocaust and the Jewish people and the Jewish religion. He's a great friend of mine, and I will be going to Riyadh, not just to visit him, but will definitely be a visit to him, but to see the possibility of establishing a Jewish community there.
So tell us about your kids. I know you have a few kids. So are they in school there? How do they go to school? How do they feel about the move? So tell us about life with your family and your kids to the extent that you can on a daily basis.
So my youngest kid is 21, graduating NYU Stern Business School. 4 of my kids are married. 2 get married next month, God willing.
Did they come with you?
No, they didn't,
but
they will be coming. They didn't. They all are pretty much established in New York, but they will eventually come to visit. And they said if they'll find a job here, they have no problem staying here. So it's, I guess, up to me to help them find a livelihood here.
I guess when I met you, your kids were small. I actually didn't realize.
When you met me,
they got older as well.
You're not going to say how many years ago,
no,
right?
No. They got older.
Well, that actually leads me to this question, Rabbi Abadie. What are your short and long-term plans in Dubai? Do they diverge?
Right. I'll tell you. Now I see also in the Q&A. I don't know if you're reading those and reading me those questions, so I don't have to read them myself. Okay, good. So what are my plans basically for the UAE, for the Jewish community in the UAE? Well, is really to establish a full service community. And I mean full service community, of course, synagogue, school, mikveh, Bet Din, and kashrut certification agency. That's what a Jewish community needs to live, to thrive, and to grow. And I believe that the Jewish community will grow significantly. But to help it grow, you need to provide all those services. And of course, God forbid, Chevra Kadisha, funeral standards and funeral, process and so on and so forth, of course. But all of those services are required for a thriving, growing Jewish community. And no Jewish community will grow unless those services are present. When a family or an individual Jew is looking to move because either of business opportunity or of being closer to the Middle East, or unfortunately escaping anti-Semitism, which unfortunately we see it in our own day in the best Western countries, that person is going to look, or that family is going to look, am I, as a Jew, can I live there as a Jew? Can I have a place to pray? Can I have kosher food? Can I have school for my children? Can I, would my wife be able to go to a mikveh and have a normal Jewish life? And so all of those are necessary. And so those are my plans to do so. My more, how shall I say, I have to tell you that there is no yet Jewish neighborhood in Dubai or in Abu Dhabi. There are Jews scattered here and there that we're trying to unite. My plan is, and this is, I guess, for the first time announced publicly, is to have a stretch of land that will be built into private homes, villas, into apartment buildings, condominiums, and hotels, plus all the communal institutions like a synagogue, a mikveh, school, a community center. and create an entire Jewish neighborhood. It's possible to do it here because there are stretches of land that are still deserted, literally deserted. And there are a lot of developers who want to do that and who want to be able to participate. So that is my my grandiose building up of a Jewish neighborhood in this area.
Rabbi, you didn't mention, but when Jews die in the UAE, what will happen?
Well, I'll tell you what, thank God so far no Jew has died. And I hope it will stay that way at least for the 220 years. But the law is, but I understand is being changed, that any expat who passes away is basically sent back to their current country of origin.
I see.
Because the family wants them there.
I see.
Now, I understand that that is being changed, and now they are providing land for burial. And so, as I said, we will need to provide that. We will need, in fact, I am in a conversation with people that deal with that, into buying a piece of land for a Jewish cemetery.
What is the current
Of course,
population, Jewish population in the UAE right now?
It's estimated to be between 800 to 1,000, most of them in Dubai.
And I understand that you have officially taken up to be the president of the UAE chapter of UAE Friends of Likud. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Although there is no political organizations here, nor organization for advocacy. So maybe I'll be honorary.
So maybe I'll modify that and I'll say that you are the head of the UAE chapter of American Friends of Likud.
Oh, yeah, maybe that we can see that. Yeah.
And we do, and we look forward to when we are hopefully soon, once everyone is vaccinated and green passports are abound and we're able to travel once again, that we will in fact travel to the UAE on one of our AFL missions to Israel before we come to Israel. I would be very much enthralled and excited to have the opportunity to come and have you be our tour guide and teach us about what is going on in the UAE before coming to Israel. That certainly will be a stop, and we look forward to connecting with you then. We look forward to seeing you, of course, here in Israel. I want to thank you for taking your time. I know it is even 2 hours later than it is here in Israel. It's a quarter to 9, it's a quarter to 11 o'clock, and I know you have a tremendous amount of work ahead of you in developing that community. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. Thank you, Sarah, for helping moderate. And I want to wish you and everyone on the call just to be safe and healthy and to stay and continue supporting American Friends of Likud. We need your help. Thank you, Rabbi Abadie.
Thank you. My pleasure, Adam. And thank you, Sarah, also. And of course, I would love to welcome you here, to host you, to take you around, show you around. You have to know one thing here about Dubai, that anything that you see anywhere else in the world, if it's here also, here is bigger and better. And that's how it is. We have the Atlantis Hotel, you know, the famous Atlantis Hotel in Bahamas. Well, we have a copy of it here. It's bigger and better.
And better.
And better.
What about the food?
The food definitely is very good. We have the Bellagio fountains of Las Vegas that they're telling me it's a copy of them here in Burj Khalifa, but they are here bigger and better. So,
we're looking forward to
you'll have a lot to see here. You'll have a lot to see and to enjoy. I'll be more than happy and honored to welcome you and take you around. Thank you for the opportunity, and all the best. All the best.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.